Your blender thing.
Yeah, natural high. Welcome back to A Celtic State of Mind. I'm Paul John Dykes. It's Monday afternoon and I'm joined by Quinny. We will hopefully also be joined by our resident poet, Mr. Kevin Graham. He's just having a few wee issues with a new device that he's using, and hopefully he will be able to join us on this Monday afternoon's bulletin. In the meantime, we'll change it up, we'll mix it up a little bit. Get your comments in. How are you feeling over the weekend? Were you lucky enough to be at the Henrik Larsson night over in Ireland? And if so, tell us a wee bit about it, because he doesn't do many live appearances. And also, we'll be looking ahead to the big one to keep the treble dream alive. Quinny, let's start off with the victory against St Mirren. Going into that game, I think, Brendan was very respectful, he always is, of Stephen Robinson teams. You're not going to get it that easy, and I don't think we did. They made it difficult for us, didn't they?
Yeah, I think, I was saying this on Celtics Are Here yesterday, but I think St Mirren away is probably the hardest away game of the season over the last couple of years. Like, they always give us a good test, a good fight there. Sometimes there's some other things that come into the equation, red cards and some refereeing decisions over the years and whatever, but certainly since Robinson, and I think, was it Goodwin before him, but certainly Robinson came into a pretty good situation at St Mirren, I think, overall. They're always handy. I definitely think it's one of the away trips or one of the away games that you expect is going to be an uphill battle for the most part.
Well, there was a spell there where we've had tricky venues to go to. The Tony Macaroni Easter Road. I think Ross County historically has been one of those places, but I don't relish going there because I know it's going to be a tough game. And it turned out to be a tough game. And I think, after two matches where you've scored 10 goals, Quinny, I said this after the game, there's no negativity. I mean, you can pick holes in just about anything in this life, but there's nothing at all to be negative about looking at the Celtic team at the moment. But we will be looking at some of the performances and how that's going to affect us between now and the end of the season. We turned it around for me, Quinny, and it might not be as simple as this. And once the data's all checked, it may not be as simple as this. But from a casual observer's viewpoint, I felt we looked so much better after the first batch of subs, and we mixed it up in the midfield. We looked more fluid after that. That's not a dig at Callum, by the way. I just felt that, Arne, slotted in there. Arne slotted in there. Reo seemed to just come to life, and McEwen contributed really well. The subs definitely made a big, big difference.
Yeah, I called it. I was having a Twitter interaction with someone around it, and I kind of called it I think maybe it was the wrong kind of analogy, but I said substitute teacher syndrome. But it's more maybe like the manager, assistant manager thing. If you think about a workplace or whatever, where McGregor's the manager, he's calling the shots, and everyone's fine with that. But as soon as the manager's got a day off and the assistant manager's in charge, like the work still gets done, but maybe the lunch break's a bit longer. Maybe
you get
coffee break.
You get to watch the Goonies on VHS. That's it.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Because like Hatate was like, a lot of the stuff that was different was Hatate driving forward and him deciding, like, there was a few times, I know you don't watch the game back, a lot of people probably would have as well, but there's a few times when Hatate's breaking through after those subs have been made where he doesn't play in Jota. Jota's out wide left and kind of free, and he plays inside to McEwen, or he tries to hit through the middle a bit more, or even the goal that he creates for Yang, he swings it right over to the back post. So it felt like, it's not really a McGregor thing necessarily, but it was just more like the substitute teacher, the assistant manager kind of vibe came into the midfield for me a bit, because it's like, the boss isn't here, so we'll do things a wee bit differently now,
Yeah, you're right. And I think that, there's going to be occasions this season, Quinny, where, let's say, half an hour before the full-time whistle and we're maybe comfortable, I think we should do it. I think we should do that, because you're always looking at succession planning, and I'm looking at Arne Engels and his performance, and more of a rigid number six, if you like. I know that he's got the defensive qualities, but he's been bursting forward, and I felt that he slotted in there brilliantly. We're now 16 points ahead, which is just as... in fact, Hibs are just as close to Rangers as Rangers are to us at this moment in time. 16 ahead, and again, this might be because of post-traumatic stress disorder, but the season before Martin O'Neill came in, or the season where we didn't win the 10, and you basically lose the league by like 20 points, 20 plus points, and it stings. It really, really stings, Quinny. So my take on this is, if you've got an unassailable lead, you want to continue with that, and you want it to be 20 plus, just to get it right up your opposition. Is that bitter? I mean, is that bad
No.
on my part? No, that's all right, isn't it?
Yeah, I think that's kind of been the way it's been for like this millennium, certainly, when it has been whoever has won the title, it's not just been about winning it, but it's been about the gap, it's been about the distance as well. So no, I think that's definitely something we've maybe not had since like the new Rangers has been around in that way as much, because when we've been spanking them before with all the other, joke situations that they've been in, like it's quite apparent that we're going to do that. But over the last year or two, like, they've just got this kind of weird belief that they're not that far ahead or that far behind, I beg your pardon. And now that points gap, it's firmly back in the bragging rights again.
Yeah, I always go back to that Martin O'Neill moment, on the steps of Celtic Park. Anybody in the comments who were actually there to see him and welcome him to the football club. And I always remember how humble he was when he went out to address the Celtic support, and he spoke about a benchmark, and the benchmark was Rangers. Now, I know a lot of Celtic fans might not like giving any kind of kudos to Rangers, but in order for, I felt at that time, in order for us to get better, we had to know where we were in terms of the food chain. That's something that Rangers aren't very good at, is it? They don't like to admit that they're second best and they're nowhere near Celtic. But I don't think that benefits anybody. Kevin Graham, we're going to hopefully hear from you. Can you hear us, young man?
I can hear you now. Can you hear me?
Absolutely, loud and clear.
Good.
We're going to be talking about some of the individual performances, not just at the weekend, but how that's going to affect us moving on to the remaining league games and the Scottish Cup ties as well, Kev. But overall, how did you enjoy the 5-2 victory over St Mirren?
Last half hour was good. It was really, really good after the substitutions. Before that, a kind of wee carry on from the first half and against Hibs at Easter Road, the majority of the Aberdeen game and the first 60 minutes against St Mirren, we were poor, just way. I know what I expect to see from the Celtic side, actually, and it's probably not what Brendan Rodgers expects to see for the Celtic side. But the last half hour, we were really, really good. Subs made a massive difference. A good last half hour. We need to kick on from this. Hopefully, now that we've got a week to prepare for Hibs, then we'll see a bit of a difference, a bit of rest and recovery. That's the 3 games a week done, and the players. And the players sort of, there's just wee things. There's a wee guys, couple of players off form and stuff like that. We seem to be playing ourselves into bother with the play out for the back at certain times. But hey, you can't argue with the last half hour against St Mirren the other night. There, we looked really, really good. Happy with the last half hour, but I'm sure when they review the game today, there'll be loads of stuff for Brendan and the coaching staff to actually point out to the players where they must do better.
So when you're watching the game, obviously as a fan, it's an emotional, view. It really is, and that's what you were saying earlier, Tony. I often watch the entirety of the game back, and at that point you notice certain things, because during the game you're looking at it going, things aren't quite flowing as well as you would like them to flow. And then, as Kev says, last half hour or since making the substitutes and mixing it up a bit in midfield, it starts to work. But what I always try and do, Quinn, is figure out why. Because you know that the personnel's changed, you get it. But how did we change? How did we change actually our approach? Because Reo started to get loads of space. Reo became an attacking force at that point and looked like I don't know which one we call him. Is it Reo when he's playing well and Hatate when he's not? I'm not sure. But he looked like the good twin brother, not the evil twin brother. Arne Engels, absolutely. I mean, I've got a few wee numbers and a few wee basic stats to talk about when it comes to Engels. So let's move on to him, because I was looking at him and I was thinking to myself.
Sorry, Paul, but before you went, you mentioned there that the first half hour, it really looked like in the first half hour we were playing match day on the ZX Spectrum for 1986. We looked really clunky and slow. Then that last half hour, I don't know what it was, some clicked into gear and we looked like a football team. But I don't know whether it's the camera angle at Love Street, but it just makes the game look so bad. And everything looked to be getting done in slow motion, And that changed in the last half hour.
The interesting thing, talking about slow motion, right? And I said this after the game, and again, it's not a dig at Callum, but it looked as though he was wading through treacle. He wasn't moving. And I was actually at one point quite concerned, Quinny, that he might have had a wee muscle injury or something, because I was looking at him going, he doesn't seem to be moving that freely. And lo and behold, a few minutes later, he comes off, which is quite unusual, particularly when we're not in the ascendancy or comfortable in the game. St Mirren were in the game until 2-2, and then we just took control at that point, and we were a different side entirely. We'll talk about the penalty shout and all that kind of stuff as well. Why do you think that was, Quinny, with Callum McGregor? Is it a concern? Was he knackered? He's played a lot of football, we know that.
Yeah, I was just thinking that. I think this is definitely the last game of Brendan's ultra marathon that he told us about back in December or whatever it was, because now obviously the next midweek game we've got is after the split, which is just par for the course. So I think McGregor, and that's the main thing I've looked at the last 3 or 4 matches with, is that lens of, I think Brendan said pre-match somewhere that they've played 23 games since December, which is half the season essentially, in that 3-month cluster, or somebody's half a season, might not be ours. We're probably closer to 70. So I think it's just a bit of that. I don't think McGregor was really subbed off for anything other than McKibben just adds legs into that situation, just adds an extra kind of burst. And although him and McGregor have equally got just as much ability to pick out a pass and take a shot and whatever, when it is 2 each against that kind of team, Brendan said after the game it was one of his favourite results of the season. And I think the bench winning it from that position of 2 each is a huge part of that. So I don't think it's necessarily a negative on McGregor this match overall, more than just he's running through quicksand. It maybe looked like at times because 23 games in 3 months or whatever.
Wow, I know. I'm like that after 1 hour on the treadmill, when it takes me 3 days to recover. Ice baths and everything, you know what I mean? And saying that, I'm a wee bit older than Callum, to be fair. Sorry, Kev, what were you going to say there?
No, let's be truthful about it. All 3 of them deserve to get taken off. All 3 subs, no matter the excuses that Rodgers gave after it. If you're just looking at guys that weren't performing on the night, all 3 of them deserve to be hooked. And that was the same at Easter Road the week before. And it was the same with the subs the other night there against Aberdeen. I don't think there can be any argument, by the way. The 3 guys that you got took off were possibly the worst players on the pitch. There you go.
Again, to be honest with you, when you're looking at performances, Kev, it is hard to argue. I remember against Hibs, it was pretty obvious. I was surprised at half-time he was so bold to take the 3 of them off, to be fair. But it worked in many, many ways. It did work. I know we didn't get the result, but there was other reasons for that. And obviously those reasons have been discussed. Not a great deal on Acsom. But we will be talking, and we'll probably bring in the 2 Alistair Johnston incidents together, because we've not really had a chance to talk about the fact that they got one wrong, let's just say, Easter Road. I was going to chat about Arne Engels, because, when you lose such a kind of linchpin of the side, as we did with Matt O'Reilly, they're 2 different types of player, but, you're talking young midfield player. He's brought in with a huge kind of reputation, Arne Engels. Matt O'Reilly was more under the radar, and he built his reputation at Celtic. He had a vintage season, Quinny, didn't he, Matt O'Reilly, last year? And we were going on about how big a part does Brendan play when a player comes out his shell like that. And yeah, we will be talking about Yang in just a moment or two, because you've seen something that certainly I did see. And Matt O'Reilly had this vintage campaign, brilliant, and he got his big move to Brighton, and whatever happens down there, we wish him well. Arne Engels, this being his first season, has had an up and down kind of time of it. When you look at some of the criticism that he's had, Quinny, there's been weeks of, probably inconsistency. I feel that the criticism was a wee bit too vehement, and that was probably due to his price tag. But he might not have been playing to his absolute best. But let's have a wee look at some of the base kind of stats here. He's now played 41 games for Celtic. He played a couple of games before he joined us, actually, but he's played 41 games for Celtic. He scored 10 goals, and he's had 12 assists. Now, in terms of minutes, 2,465 minutes means that he has scored or created a goal every 112. In Matt O'Reilly's vintage season, every 115. So at the moment, as we're sitting here, Arne Engels has created and scored more goals than Matt did in his final season. The season is not yet finished. I think he continues to silence a lot of the critics. And I think he was a massive part in the turnaround in the game, Quinny. And I think he's at that stage now where we shouldn't really doubt him. We know, he is actually worth that money. And he has had a really, really good campaign. And he's only going to get better.
Yeah, I think he's been great. I think that's... In terms of criticism and stuff that's came his way, I think a big part of Engels, and maybe O'Reilly didn't have that examination because of the like much smaller price tag and expectation level when he came in. But there was just periods where it just was kind of absent in matches. There wasn't really anything obvious, even in some of the better matches of like really the difference that he makes potentially to the team. Whereas O'Reilly, it was very, very clear for, really the most part of the Celtic career. Maybe he didn't come into the biggest like furore of like, oh, what a signing and this is how he's playing or whatever. But for the most part, you kind of felt you always kind of got something from O'Reilly, and Engels maybe had a few games in there where, and again, looking back at it, there was a period where he wasn't really starting games consecutively that often. Rodgers would be like start and bench him, start him, and kind of just bled him into the team. And I suppose when you're kind of going match to match, it's quite easy to think, oh, he's not really nailing down a place in the team, or he's not really hit the ground running from that initial burst of when he signed in. But when you kind of zoom back and you look at it, like it looks very methodical. It looks very prepared in terms of like when he gets minutes, how many minutes he gets, what competitions he's prioritized for, and what games he's been made, to make sure he's in good nick to start. Because he started all the Champions League games off the top of my head, I'm pretty sure, amongst one or two others. So it's actually been a pretty solid season from him and like the manager and the club regarding it all. But I think when you're living it week to week, if the guy doesn't, if the record signing isn't ripping the game up and tearing it, grabbing it by the scruff of the neck himself, it's easy just to go, oh, he was mince today,
Pressure, big pressure and all that. I think when we look back on the campaign, particularly the fact that it was his first Champions League campaign, I think we'll look at the performances and say what a brilliant signing he's been, and you look forward to how that's going to develop next season as well, Kev, because we're continually told by Brendan himself that that's what he loves doing. He loves developing players, particularly young guys. I think he's also good at taking people who maybe their career isn't going to plan, and he takes them in, puts them under his wing and starts to develop them and build their confidence back up. I'm not saying Sloop was on the scrap heap or anything, but he seems to be working wonders with Jeff Sloop as well.
He does seem to be working wonders with Jeff Sloop, and it's an interesting thing, I think, the way that Sloop interprets the fullback role. It's completely different for the way Greg Taylor interprets the fullback role, whereas he is more a fullback, he is more an overlapping fullback. It was interesting the other week there, I wasn't one of the fans who was watching Barry Backpass's return at Rugby Park. I was having a wee watch of the Arsenal game, and Kieran Tierney came on, and it was really interesting when Tierney came on. He replaced Ricardo Calafore, who was playing as an inverted fullback, and when Tierney came on, he was playing a more traditional wing-back role. It was a wing-back role, and that I found that really interesting. I think we'll see our interpretation of a fullback revert in the summer to what we believe a fullback is. I mean, the inverted fullback works, and I think it depends on your own personal view of Greg Taylor, if you love it or hate it. I've got to that opinion now that it doesn't matter if it's Greg Taylor, it's a problem. A lot of people know the actual inverted fullback role, but I think we're going to revert to, we'll see our fullbacks differently from the summer onwards. I think you're going to get two Alistair Johnsons, the type of fullback that Brendan wants. What I loved, Celtic unique angle again, called the big Sloop Meister, Sloop Doggy Dog, when he put in the ball for Yang for the 5th goal and Yang's second. I'm just leaning on the advertising boards, just nodding his head as if to go, aye, I like it here. I love it here.
Yeah.
Like this is good. The big fella's made a marvelous contribution at the moment, and if you're just going on form, then it's his jersey to lose. If you're just going on form,
I'd agree with that. And that, you're right, it's nothing to do with any kind of personal feelings towards any of the other players who can play there, Kev. If it's form only, Sloop's in the team, and he needs to be removed. By the way, in terms of the McGregor question, there was talk after the game by Brendan in relation to him maybe feeling his calf a wee bit, which is horrendous football injury. It sounds just a wee calf strain. It's terrible. You can barely walk when you've got even a strain. So you're hoping that he's fit for the Hibs game. The other concern, of course, was Austin Trusty with a head knock. I think he got half a dozen stitches or so in the head knock as well. And again, talking about form and everything else, I just, I know he's not been flawless, Quinny, Trusty, but I think we're a much more solid unit with him in it at centre half. I think him and Carter Vickers at this moment in time are still my first choice partnership.
I think he's seen a great moment in this match before he gets sent off. I don't actually think he was having a good game, to be honest with you. I thought last match he wasn't particularly good either. But Olasanya, Schmeichel gets the credit for the save, which he should, but Trusty does a hell of a lot to stay on his tail and to make that really hard for him. And Scales would not have kept up with that. Vickers obviously didn't either, So I thought that was a real good moment for him. We've seen him recover in pace before some bigger matches, obviously, but seeing domestically in some of the smaller pitches, and that, it just felt a bit more like, oh yeah, you can definitely see this is something they see on the training ground day in, day out, or when they're shaping the team and when they're training the team, that he's clearly got that extra gear that isn't always there. I think that's probably one of the fastest I've seen him run. So I do think, I was mentioning this as well, like I think with Scales and Taylor, it's kind of this thing that, especially for whoever's at the game, whether it's away or home, if they're on the ball and there's a bit of pressure on them, if people have nerves around them, that just kind of comes out and it ends up on the pitch somehow. And with Trusty, people don't have that. So I think there's just it just feels like a nicer balance. It just feels like a lot more composure just around the place generally when they're playing out. I think Trusty Butt is a bit similar to Vickers in terms of like dimension of passing, if that makes sense, where they can play and how they play sort of thing. I don't think Trusty's been great for the last couple of games. But I want him back in the team, at the moment. So I just think that is probably the best partnership that we have right now. But I think it's so tight between Scales and Trusty. I really don't think there's much in it.
We're going to have discussions probably in a few weeks' time around summer reinforcements and all the rest of it. And I do think centre half's going to be part of that discussion. I do, when I look at the squad, Kev, Nawrocki's still been in and around the squad recently, and we've got to have a stronger option at the back.
Maybe that's Dane Murray. Who knows how he's going to progress over the summer and get a pre-season. What I would disagree with Quinny, what Quinny actually says there, they says that there's no much between Scales and Trusty. I'm going to say there's 5 yards of pace and a bigger physicality. That's the difference, and that's why Trusty is always going to get the nod.
You think so?
I think so, yes.
Carter Vickers is the fridge. What did they call him at Celtic Park? What did they call him again? Some inanimate object. They refer to him as that because he's like the side of a house.
Is it not the fridge?
It might be.
Is it not the fridge? And
none
of them were born when the original fridge, Walter Perry, was playing for the Chicago Bears. None of them were born. I think Trusty's more got a better physicality and a better pace than Scales. Yes, he gave away one chance on Saturday night, but then you noticed as well, and this is not to go with Scales. We gave up 5 decent chances in that first half. 5 decent chances, and Cameron Carter Vickers was to blame for at least 2 of them as well, being caught on his heels. But the majority, the 3 of them came when Scales was on the pitch as well. So there was the first one when the boy burst through on goal and he put it high, wide and mighty, and he nearly hit Glasgow Airport with the ball. Scales was caught on the wrong side of the boy, completely caught on the wrong side, and so was Carter Vickers. Do I think we could upgrade on Trusty? Yes, I do. Do I think we could upgrade on Scales? Yes, I do. Will we upgrade on Trusty? No. Not in the summer. I can't see it being a priority in the summer. I think that will probably be looked at further on. We spent £6 million on the fella, which is a lot of money for us. Should they be a lot of money for us? The price that we paid for Maeda and Engels should be what we pay normally for players. That's what we need to get to. That's a completely whole different discussion. But I think when you have a look at it, I think we'll have another year with Trusty and Cameron Carter Vickers, and they'll look to develop a third one, which is more than likely to be Dane Murray. I can't see us spending big money on a centre half in the summer, even though we should, even though every position should be up for grabs, should be up for improvements. If the opportunity presents itself, I can't see it happening in the summer. I think we've got other areas in the summer where the focus will be.
Yeah, it would be good. It'd be good to get rid of it too. Sorry, on you go, Quinny, mate.
I was going to say on that, I feel, but Brendan was talking about something before or after the game as well, talking about how you need to give, like, there needs to be space for young players to come into the squad. And I think, like, if Scales doesn't want to leave, like, he's just going to fall into the Ralston role, essentially, as a centre back. You know, if he's
which is fine, which is completely fine with me, completely fine.
So then there's only really one more spot for a centre back, like, really to be in the picture. Like, yeah, you could have Dane Murray and go buy somebody, but then at 5 centre backs, like, how many of them are actually going to get minutes? It's probably not many. So I would be surprised if we bought a centre back in the summer, you know, but we'll probably get some money for Lagerbielke. I don't know if you've been keeping up with him, but he's rinsing it right now. He's doing brilliant in Holland.
It would be amazing if we could get our money back on.
Easy.
You know,
easy.
Aye, and I don't know what's going to happen in Nawrocki. It'll be very difficult to get anything back, and what will probably happen is he'll go out on a year-long loan before anybody looks at him, a wee bit like Lagerbielke. So we might be a couple down, and then I guess at that point maybe the decision would look at it, but not a priority by any means. Yeah, I mean the Schlupp thing as well, Kev. Like you say, I just think there's a lot of players out there who are gettable for Celtic in that kind of ballpark, the Jeffrey Schlupp, who might not be getting a game every single week. But, I mean, you look at his statistics and he's got the best part of 300 English Premiership games under his belt. Yeah, he's just turned 32, but he can slot into a game against St Mirren at New St Mirren Park. No problem. You know what I mean? It's like, obviously he's got to be professional, he's got to be tuned in and all the rest of it. But there's a lot of players out there that we could bring in that's actually going to improve the squad. And I think Schlupp's proven that. I would like to see him stay. I don't know if there's going to be a deal in the making. If it's all about money, he'll probably go somewhere else. If he wants to come and actually be part of something that wins and is successful, then I would like to see him stay for another season. We'll see how that one goes. A couple other performances, but let's get some of the comments coming in from the very busy comments section. 1,400 strong on the live. It's you and Boy Martin and Brendan we trust. And you know he will improve players, and the transformation in Yang is fantastic to see. I always knew there was a player in there and delighted for him. A lot's been made about the fact that his missus is over at the moment as well. Patrick Docherty, King Midas Maeda, everything he touches turns to golden goals. We'll be having a look at his season. What a season he's having. And John Keenan comes in on the old YouTube. Hibs are on a good run, but I think we should have enough in the tank to see them off, especially with no midweek games now. We'll definitely focus on that game coming up, John. Thanks, everybody, for your comments. Keep them coming up, regardless of where you're watching us. It could be on YouTube, Twitch, X, Instagram, LinkedIn, or even Facebook. And I'm pretty sure in the future there'll be a few other platforms as well. Reo Hatate then, right? I mean, it's been like, you know, the old up and down. We don't say that it's been a roller coaster ride, more like the waltzers with Reo Hatate, because it's slow, it's fast, it's good, it's bad. And at the weekend there, it was everything all in one, Quinny. All in the one performance. We got the almost anonymous Reo where he's giving the ball away, slacking up. And then something just kicked in. I mean, there was the moment it didn't result in a goal where he's been hacked from behind and it would be easy for him to go down, but somehow he manages to stay on his feet. And the strength, and he drives forward and he plays the ball through. He looked brilliant. He looked absolutely tremendous in the last, I would say, maybe 25, 30 minutes of the game.
Yeah, I think like it wasn't stellar like earlier in the game, but I don't think he was putting too much far wrong. Like this game's always tough, it's always tight, and the way St Mirren's set up as well, there's just not easy opportunities. You really need to graft to get spaces. You really need to be really on your A game. And I don't think he was great. He definitely grew into the match. Someone made a great comment earlier where the norm used to be get subbed at 60, 70. Now the norm is becoming that the final 20, 30 is actually when he's getting up his gears. He's hitting 4th, 5th and 6th and starting to pull the strings. So it's maybe just a little bit of personal game management for him. Perhaps that he's like, I don't know, maybe still needs to master that whole 1st and 2nd gear bit, still being decent and not being semi-anonymous or whatever. But I think I didn't really come out with many negative feelings about Hatate in this game, like from the first half in particular. Like Kev said, like some of the guys were just running at it in the beginning, you know, and the guys that came off were obviously the main culprits. But there was a lot of that in the team where there was like, you could just see that they'd played 23 games in the last couple of months or whatever. But I think the big change coming into the second half was that kind of just that change of, you know, say the captain's now changed. It's now not McGregor. We don't need to now build that same pattern, and we could do something a bit different. But also, like at that point as well, Jota coming on as as well adds a new dynamic to the front three, because obviously Maeda goes through the middle, and then it's just, just different passing lanes open up and different routes to go happen. So it's a wee bit of, is it as much McGregor, but there's also that Ida question as well with the front line. Does the rest of the team work a little bit better when that's the style of the front three we've got?
By the way, Jota looks so sharp, Quinny. He looks so sharp. And I think we were all at that point where, between now and the end of the season, it might take him a wee while to acclimatise and all that. He's not played much football in the last 18 months. None of that. 3 or 4 weeks in, and he's looking really, really sharp. It's like, when we'll get on to this point, but moving into a big game like the Hibs game, or a game where you really want to put Rangers to the sword, let's be honest, we do. Jota starts these games at the moment, and I don't know how many of us would have predicted that when he arrived. Reo Hatate, Kev, Graham, is there a way tapping into it, or do you just take the rough with the smooth with Reo? Is he just an inconsistent player?
Saturday, I was really, really annoyed with him when the ball dropped for the second goal. He was standing there watching it, and he should have, and he should have went and closed the guy down. I was really annoyed with that. I was really annoyed with that. Against Aberdeen, I was really annoyed when he got caught on the halfway line and he allowed the ball to bounce and Aberdeen broke. Basically, I think sometimes you can see when his head's not there. I think sometimes you can see when he's not quite on it. Is he inconsistent? Really, the last half hour on Saturday night was brilliant. Absolutely fantastic drive, the Reo Hatate that we really want to see. Yes, he's inconsistent, and this takes me back to my feelings that Brendan Rodgers would rather have a guy who gives you 7, 8 out of 10 every week in the midfield than a Reo Hatate who can go for 2 out of 10 for 60 minutes, then a 9 out of 10, 10 out of 10 for the last 30 minutes. And that's how I feel that Brendan Rodgers and Celtic won't be too difficult to deal with in the summer when it comes to Reo Hatate. I think he's one of the first team players that would be, that not necessarily me, that Rodgers will be looking to upgrade in the summer to a more consistent Rodgers style player. I really do think at the moment, I did say that earlier on in the season I would be happy with any of the midfield 5, Bernardo, McCowan, Callum McGregor, Engels and Hatate all starting. Any of those combinations I was going to be really, really happy with. But as the seasons went on, Brendan's went to the tried and trusted of his starting three is always Callum McGregor, Engels and Hatate. And I think Hatate's spot is up for grabs in that three. I really do, because he's inconsistency. And I really do, and I do think that's I think it's a Rodgers thing. I've always had a look at this, try to have a look at what would Rodgers have a look at, and I do think he's maybe tolerating Hatate because the other ones haven't really stepped up. Look, McCowan can step up in domestic games. Paulo Bernardo's injured. I don't think Bernardo's really kicked on the way that we thought he was going to kick on. But I do think Hatate's there is because there's nobody really else stepped up to the plate. But he's fantastic. In that last half hour, he was brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. And I think Rodgers sees that in him, but it's not consistent enough for Brendan.
You imagine him having anything like the consistency of Maeda. It'd just be a sensational proposition. I hope
even him having the consistency that we're seeing over Engels. Engels has had a consistency over the last 8 weeks. Hatate's never had a consistency over 8 weeks, and that will eventually be his downfall with Brendan, I think.
Well, I would like to keep all our best players. I always say
so would I, but I'm just.
I know. And by the way, they've had a kind of up and down in terms of actually being selected. I always go back to those initial games under Brendan Rodgers after he came back. David Turnbull getting the nod over Reo Hatate back then. Who's in the Yang Gang? We'll get to that, Martin. We will get to who is in the Yang Gang. Absolutely. Is there any chance of Lagerbielke coming back? John, I'm basically going to put my neck on the line and say no. And I'm basing it. This is the thing, right? See, when, for example, a Celtic state of mind, Quinny with Seltzer here, people who have got an involvement in a Celtic platform that is producing every day, as we do, we produce Celtic chat, Celtic blogs, Celtic content every single day. You meet a lot of people and you you hear things and you're told things in confidence, etc. Sometimes they'll say, I don't mind you mentioning this, just don't tell anybody it came from me. And that just happens, Quinny. It's not about trying to be in the know and all this nonsense, right? You just get told things. And from what I've heard, Lagerberg, there's no chance of him ever being a Celtic player under Brendan Rodgers. It's not going to happen, right? So if we get our money back on him, John, I just think absolutely take it. Now, here's the thing that Jim brings up, and I've spoken to Liam Carrigan about this a lot. Japan is a market we should be scouting. I was just thinking, guys, off the top of your head, Kev, Quinn, I'm going to put you on the spot here. Who left Celtic first, Nakamura or Kokai Mizuno? Who left the club first?
Nakamura.
Can you remember?
It'd have to be Kokai Mizuno.
Right. Mizuno was still there for a year after Nakamura, believe it or not.
Wow.
I didn't know that. I just checked it myself. So Mizuno left the football club in 2010. We did not have another Japanese player at Celtic until Kyogo came in 2021. 11 years of untapped potential in the Japanese market. Jim, I agree with you. It should be continually scouted. Are we doing it and we just don't find a player? If that's the case, great. If we're not doing it, that annoys me because it's obviously shown us that there are players there. And every single season, you know, Liam Carrigan now running the Acsom blog will tell us about guys that might be able to come to Celtic and make an impact. Whether or not we've got a scouting ambassadorial figure over there, I'm not so sure we do. Alistair Ross, Yang, let's talk about him then. Everybody's banging on about Yang. Let's talk about him. Has been a revelation this last month. Another example of Brendan's great man management. I think that comes into it in a huge, huge way. He's persevered with them, isn't he, guys? I mean, you know, a lot of us, myself included, wrote Yang off. I wouldn't have minded if he'd gone out in January. Absolutely wouldn't have had an issue with it. But Brendan seemed to see something, Quinny, in this boy. And he persevered with him and persevered with him. And now it's bearing fruit. We're seeing a player who has got that spring, that momentum that you see with the confidence that's growing. And he's getting in amongst the goals and the assists. And that's what a winger has to do. And he wasn't doing it until recently. But fair play that he's finally managed to get that spark. And he's now the type of guy that you think to yourself, he's a hidden weapon now on the bench. If you start with Jota and Kuhn, which at the moment I think is our strongest, right? Jota, Kuhn, Maeda down the middle. That's how I'm looking at it. And you're looking at Yang now, you're actually thinking he could do something. Previously, I didn't have the same kind of feeling about him.
Yeah, well, he's definitely like improved, hasn't he? There's an epic comment in the chat. It's at 12:57 from Ace55N44. I don't know if there's some sort of play with the name there, but it is a chant. That will be a chant we hear in the terraces at some point. It's an absolute topper, and I think that's been like somebody mentioned it before. Brendan's obviously dogged him in that his bird's in town. And that's been maybe the difference. That's what's helped him find that extra yard. And if you listen to Brendan on Celtic TV, like he is just so close to just saying exactly what that comment is. You know, that's what's happened for it. So, like, I don't know. I've always been happy to give Yang a bit of latitude because, like, when you look at all the guys that we've kind of brought in over the last couple of years, like you look at the Rockies, Odenholms, Yangs, Bernabes. You know, like. People, some of them, like Bernabe doing well, probably doesn't surprise that many people because there was like moments and you're like, there's maybe a bit of a player in there. He's got a wee bit of something that you like, but it doesn't maybe quite happen. And then there's some players where they don't really show much and you never hear from them again, like Ibui Kawase or, you know, random guys like that, for example. And I think with Yang, like he's always had like something that, as you see with Lewis Palma and one or two other players, that there's some things you can't teach footballers. Like, and he's always been brave. He's always been on the front foot and he can dribble. You know, like he's not amazing at it. He's not like Paddy Roberts and it takes 3 guys to stop him, but he'll go by one guy, you know, and what he's been missing is making it work, making it happen, you know, or making it worthwhile, you know, squaring the ball for somebody else for a tap in or for himself just being in the right place to get a wee tap in. So I've kind of maintained throughout this Yang saga, as it were, like what he's not got, he can get with time. It's just whether we had the time to afford him, you know, but he's been in the deep end for about a month now. So he's starting to swim and well done the manager and well done the player. And we need to, I don't know if we need to negotiate a new contract to get his bird a flat in Glasgow or something like that, or what we need to do, but it's probably an investment worthwhile at this point.
get her over, get her across. And Quinny, to be fair, you have said it. You've said it time and time again. You know, you felt we had the raw minerals and it was all about just trying to get that out of him. The make or break kind of aspect to that, a lot of fans, myself included, would have maybe written him off. Rodgers hasn't, and he's finally tapped into it at just the right time as well. And Kev, I'll be getting your thoughts on Yang as well. But before I do that, we've heard all about Sloop Dog and Dr. Way and all these different things and Youngster's Paradise. McLaughlin P says it's the Wu Yang clan. I knew that would be right up your street, mate. You're a big fan.
Love
that.
Right, Kev. I mean, I'm not at the point where I'm starting Yang against Hibs in the Scottish Cup or against Rangers in a couple of weeks' time, but I do think that he's a weapon.
To go on the Wu Yang clan theme, he's definitely the method man, due to him being an old dirty B. See, naming Wu-Tang clan members there. I didn't work, right? I'll forget about it. I didn't have time to plan it out in my head. It might be the first case of a guy's life being significantly improved by a woman being involved. Maybe.
Could every single female listener please comment? I'll bring all your comments up and we'll just get stuck in about Kev for the last one. That's going to go down like a Led Zeppelin, Kev. You're digging, mate.
I know. After the Wu Yang clan thing, I've just went down a hole, so I may as well just... That's me in my gravel pit now.
Is it because I called him a weapon and it's just thrown you?
It's just completely thrown me. I think I made the comment just after New Year that after one game, Jota had more goals and assists than Yang had for the whole of the season. He has improved. I think. Look, a lot of it's been due to the fact that we've had nobody else. Jamesy Forrest has been injured, and
that seems to be rolling on the Forrest injury. When's he back? Do we know?
I think Brendan keeps on saying that he's not far away from being on the grass now. That's what Brendan keeps on saying. So I think there's been a wee bit of perseverance with him because we've had nobody else. My opinion hasn't really changed. I still think he's not in our top two wingers, but maybe my opinion's changed. I used to have a look at Cherny across the road, over the water, over the hill, wherever they are. And I used to think I wouldn't mind him in my squad. And now I'm having a look at Yang going, and I'm quite happy that he's coming on now. Because that ball that he played for Dyson, what an absolute picture ball for Dyson's goal.
Unbelievable.
And you can actually see Luke McCowan says to him as well, in the unique angle again, you see Luke McCowan going across going, that was some ball. And Alistair Johnson came across as well and points to his leg as if to go, what a ball that was, eh? Sorry, Danielle, I know everybody.
I was keeping that up. Until you responded.
I was tongue in cheek. It was a bit Danny Dyer, sorry. So I think it's been a welcome accident that he's actually improved, and it's something that Rodgers has kind of stumbled across. I still think we need another winger in the summer. I really do. I think we can't run with three wingers. So Yang's maybe there's a decision to be made with Yang between now and the end of the season, and over the summer, and Rodgers will make that decision. I still believe that we'll bring in another winger, and we'll probably run. I think we'll actually. I do think we need a first choice winger. I do not see Dyson as a winger now. I think Rodgers may be looking at him going, right, you're going to play a centre forward role now rather than out in the wing. And if he gets this 10, 11 million pound winger in the summer, this other winger in the summer, you might see Dyson move into that role, and even Yang will be used more often from the bench. But I do think we've stumbled across it more than anything. I really do think that. And
well, I'll tell you what, long may it continue. See, if Jota plays that pass to Maeda, we're all calling him a genius.
Yes.
It was a brilliant first time ball, and Maeda's first touch was sensational as well. It's got to be said. We'll get to him.
It's one of the first times I've actually heard Chris Boyd say something like sensible when he spoke about Maeda's that goal the other night. There, he says in the past he would have tried to knock it by the guy, instead of knocking it across him. He would have just went, I'm using my pace, I'm just going to knock it in front of me, and I'm going to run onto it. He says you can now actually see he's thinking, I'm going to knock it across. And when he goes by him, as Boyd points out, he has a look where the goal is. he knows what he's going to do. Whereas before, sometimes you got the impression that he just went with the flow. And I think you saw that with his goal in his League Cup, in the League Cup final as well. He was thinking about it as he was going along. And look, whatever we can say about Boyd scored quite a lot of goals, and he knows how to put the ball into the back of the net. And for Boyd to actually mention that, so you actually have a look, he says he's done that really, really well there. And so, I mean, Chris Boyd struggles to put a sentence together a lot of the time, but I must admit he did actually say.
All right, we'll give him that. I'll give him that one.
I'll give him his due there. I will give him his due.
He's only been at the game about a decade, but that's all you want, Quinny, from an ex-pro is a bit of insight. That's all you kind of expect from them. You just don't want a rabid fan sitting in a chair getting really angry every time his team gets beat. You just want a wee bit of insight, don't you?
Yeah, that striker craft is definitely something he should be offering in terms of insight. And yeah, I kind of missed that myself, but that's great when it comes. I was going to say, I think I definitely think a huge part of the budget this summer will go on another, I'll just say forwards, but I think the remit is still going to be replace Kyogo. And I think it will be somebody that can equally play wide. Like Kev said, I definitely think we need another option that's that level that can play wide as well. But I do think plan A will still be Dyson through the middle. But imagine right now Dyson got injured. Like we can't play that way without him now. There's no Kyogo in Dyson, and if Kyogo's out, you just play Dyson there. You're now like at the bare bones of that system. And if that's the way you want to play, Bayern Munich at home or away or whatever happens to us next year, without Maeda, it can't happen. So I think the remit versatility will be important, but I think the remit will still be like replace Kyogo, and he'll make the board spend a lot of money, hopefully.
I think he will. I think he will push the boat out. He'll get them to not like bow to his demands, but I think this season he's got credit in the bank now. There was an incredible focus around Brendan that week, the two Bayern Munich games, where it was almost as if he felt as though what I've demanded and what I've got, I'm going to show you that this is the reason why. I'm going to show you how close we can get. And then what is progress next year? Well, it's quite easy now. Progress next year is getting into the last 16. It's easy actually to gauge that now, right? And in order to do that, we need to be stronger. And I think you're right. The priority is definitely a forward. If you can get someone who's able to do something and is equally effective in two different positions, tremendous. But you're right, we haven't replaced Kyogo. There's a discussion around Ida and what's happening with the big man at the moment. Seems to have lost his edge. We are running with one out-and-out striker. I don't know if we yet classed Dyson as an out-and-out striker. I was having a look at this, though. In the last 10 years, not including this one, the last 10 seasons, we've only had 3 players scoring 30 or more goals. And it was Lee Griffiths, Moussa Dembele, and, of course, the wee man himself, Kyogo. Dyson's on 26, so it does look likely that he's going to hit that 30 mark. That's an incredible return for a player. And he's got 9 assists as well. So across the entirety of 40 games, he's averaging a goal or assist every 89.66 minutes. So a goal or an assist every game. If he's on the park, he's going to make something happen. Smell the Glove says, Mizuno made decent golf clubs. You know this, I have never, here you go, there's a bit of self-disclosure, I have never played golf in my life. Never once have I played golf. That's incredible, right? Mizuno, yeah, I remember having a pair of Mizuno trainers at one point as well. We were talking about surnames. Who remembers Dykes Furnishing? You remember that? Anybody? 1980s adverts? No. Unfortunately, it wasn't my granddad's company, and I didn't inherit any of the sale price when it sold it to DFS or whatever. Kev, Graham's Dairies. I can't think of one for Quinny, but what I will say, Quinny, is that your namesake, the original, Jimmy Quinn, right, was the guy that Iron Brew, that bars wanted to be on the tins of Iron Brew. They approached him first, and he knocked it back. And he was on a royalty deal, mate. He was on a royalty deal on sales of Iron Brew at that time. Bars, of course, being one of the first shareholders in Celtic Football Club. There you go. Could have made a few quid over the years. Green Lichty. Share issue naming rights is the only way we'd manage to afford a stadium upgrade. We obviously did interview David Lowe a few weeks back on This Is Acsom. We spoke about that. I don't think we need to do that to do it. We could afford it. It's whether or not we want to use our money to refurbish the main stand. But the reason I'm bringing this up, Green Lichty, is naming rights. I mean, do you call the stadium? We call the Tony Macaroni because of the spaghetti had thing and all that, right? But does anybody actually care what something's sponsored by? Would you, Kev, if Celtic Park got the naming rights out there, and I'm not even going to give you an example of a sponsor, but would you even call it that, or would you just still call it Celtic Park or Parkhead? Because everybody calls it one or the other. I'm not even going to go into the realms of other ones, right? Celtic calls it Paradise, right? We get that. That's part of the folklore and the fairy tale. What do you call it, Quinny? Celtic Park? Parkhead?
I'm mainly a Parkhead guy.
Parkhead.
Paradise. Parkhead, Paradise, Celtic Park. That's probably my 3 order.
Yeah. That's the only 3 acceptable ones, right? Anything else is just, I'm sorry, you're smoking a pipe in a West End cafe or something. I mean, Kev, what do you call it?
Parkhead.
Parkhead.
Aye, Parkhead. Aye.
Now, is there an issue?
No, I don't think there's an issue with naming rights. I think the issue with naming rights now is it seems to have ran its course. You look at like the number of new stadiums that have been built that they can't get naming rights for. I think the Everton stadiums won, the Tottenham Hotspur stadiums won. It doesn't seem to be a thing anymore. It doesn't seem to be one that a sponsor will come in and splatter their name on a stadium because there's very, very little return.
I think
sorry, Quinny, when you go.
I was going to say, I think the big problem with that is people have got this perception that naming rights is like worth a lot of money, but most of the time it's just like a lever for like the owner to inject money into the team, because look at Man City, it's all called the Etihad and Emirates everywhere and all that, and guess who owns those companies? It's not like you're going to put Celtic Park or like, remember Rangers when they almost got theirs renamed to Sports Direct Arena, which would have just been absolutely perfect. The only reason he's up for doing that is because he had like a tie-in with them already. He's not like, oh, that's going to be a great idea and it'll really transform my business and get my name out there or whatever. So I think people think it's something that it isn't. It's just more of I don't want to say money laundering, but it's just like a way of getting the money into the team.
Yeah,
it's another avenue of putting up revenue.
Yeah,
but even then, that's been tightened up on. If you're spending £30 million on naming rights,
it needs to be commercial. It needs to be in balance with the real world.
And I think that's where Spurs have fell down, because I think they wanted something like £200 million for X amount. Unlike the Emirates, which got naming rights at the time, where I think they got an utterly incredible deal. And obviously it was just to pump money into Arsenal. That's all it was. But it was virtually worthless getting the naming rights of the stadium. And I do think that's no longer a really option that they look at. The naming rights, I think that's actually went and passed. And if it was going to be the Emirates, I thought they would have done it in 2014 when they built the Emirates Arena across the road. I thought that could have been an Emirates like
tie-in. Yeah, absolutely. Partnership. See, the thing as well, Kev, we've spoken in the past around it. The first gig I ever went to was U2 at Celtic Park, 1993. Completely different look to the stadium back then, it's got to be said. But we've since found that the reason we don't do concerts is because you do need, obviously, to bring in massive cranes to erect stages and all the rest of it. And our, what would you call it? Not a walkway, but the vehicular access isn't big enough for the types of vehicle you need to get in to do all that kind of stuff. So if you were to redo the main stand and you were to put that right and have your underground access for buses and all that stuff that you would probably have if you're redeveloping it, maybe there's a tie-in with some kind of live events company, or the biggest artists come to Celtic Park. That would be good.
It was actually quite funny you mentioned that. I was watching the Aston Villa game, and it was mentioned on the Aston Villa game that their wage bill is 92% of their turnover. So they're looking at ways to actually increase their turnover. So obviously this summer they're having gigs by Black Sabbath, Kendrick Lamar, Beyonce, and there's a few other gigs, and that's actually mainly just to increase their turnover. So they didn't actually breach the FSR rules if it's saving somebody. If it's selling somebody, so that's mental that they're actually having a look, and that's an American influence into British football, and it will become more and more prevalent. I do think if whatever level of takeover happens across the way, they will look to do that with Ibrox. That'll be the stadium that they'll be looking at.
As a venue,
as a venue rather than the football team, because the income's already maxed out. So how do they bring in more income, i.e. they increase the stadium? I know what David Lowe was saying about shares to actually increase the stadium as well. It could be something that they actually look at. to do rather than take it out the funds that are there. But if they're going to make it into an all-purpose, a venue that wants that wants concerts, that wants European finals, this and that, it's more than what we've got sitting in the bank. That is really more than what we've got sitting in the bank. And if we were of any interest whatsoever to American hedge funds or American investors, or if Dermot Desmond was looking to sell his shares, any investor would come in, that would be the first thing they would do. They would saddle us with debt and we do the main stand so we can get all the events. That's what will actually happen.
Yeah, we're talking about 100 million quid, aren't we? Smell the glove. Dane Murray has a huge pre-season coming up to impress Brendan. I think you're right. And we've also got on a permo, the negative outweighs the positive with Hatate for me. He's the midfielder to replace with a number 6. We've also got Paul Maguire. That's Kev getting phoned by the club. Have said something that they didn't like, Quinny. Paul Maguire, that's maybe the blog. Any win will do. Hibs are playing well. Hail, hail. They are the team to beat right now. No doubt about it. Now, Jungle Lion was at the Henrik Larsson event over the weekend. He said he was in great form. It looked like a brilliant one. And talking events, Paddy Lavery comes up with something a little bit cryptic here. The Crumlin Star is buzzing for some strange reason. All I'm going to say at the moment is that, and this is true, I'm not making this up, right? Acsom are currently organising a world tour of Celtic supporters clubs, and we've already got about 10 dates in the works at the moment, and we'll be announcing them individually, and also there'll be a big tour poster going out. We're just basically getting out and about, Quinny. You know, we're just going to go and visit people all over the globe. There's some dates in America, Europe, obviously closer to home, places like Logelly and Trinent. As well, you've got to throw that into the tour poster. So if you're part of a CSC and you want Acsom to come along and bring a couple of Excelts or one Excel and have a big fundraising night for your club or for a charity or any other reason, give us a shout and we can organise it. Durban Culture, Ida will come good. Right, he's lost a bit of his mojo. He's lost a wee bit of his edge, Quinny. Is he concerning you yet?
I don't know. I don't think so. I've kind of came to, for where he's at right now, it just feels like he's went back to that position he was in earlier in the season when he had Kyogo breathing down his neck and his position wasn't certain, and it was like little flashes of things that looked okay, but ultimately not. Like the player we had there for about a month and a half, when he knew nobody's taking, this is my shirt now, you know, Kyogo's out the building, Maeda was still out wide. So yeah, I'm not writing him off, like, because what we've seen, like, he's definitely capable of doing everything we need him to do for the most part, you know. I think he's showing that he can lift his game beyond the level we've kind of found him at. I think this season's maybe put some question on that. You know, like, can he get much better? Is probably the main thing I would hold against him. But I'm not like giving up on him or thinking he's overly like needing replaced, as it were, in the team. I think he's just about par.
When I look at Adam Maeda, I just think that, you know, last season, that it was almost a cameo, but it was flawless, really. And you know what he did, coming on, making an impact, scoring in cup finals, scoring against Rangers, a couple of the away games, Easter Road, Fir Park, even Ibrox, and scoring important goals. This time round, his moments are spread out over the entirety of a season, and I've said it before, and I'm going to keep saying it. I think we're going to get big moments from Ida between now and the end of the season. None more so than the game coming up, Kev. We're facing a Hibs side where momentum is so key in football, isn't it? And they are playing with a confidence, a bounce, whatever you want to call it, a belief, a self-belief. And they'll be coming into the game, particularly after the Easter Road performance, thinking, we can take Celtic. And obviously we've gone in there and we want to keep the treble dream alive. This is the toughest game we're going to have between now and the end of the season, if you ask me.
I would say this is the toughest domestic game that we've faced so far this season, or it's definitely the biggest domestic game that we've faced so far this season. Momentum's a funny thing, and this is where, when you talk about investors, I mean, Hibs last week, their owners announced that they were writing off the debt of £7.2 million that they've got. Mm-hmm. And it's going to be a donation, and they're not going to look to get it back. They'll get it back some way. But it just won't be as clear as what it is. And I think Hibs are a perfect example of showing, if you've got a budget, you can make a challenge in Scottish football if you beat the teams that have got a lesser budget than you.
Yeah.
And you can get in. So the Hibs owners are now having a look at going, well, we can finish third here, which is guaranteed European football, which for us, that's small fry money, but for them, it's money that it changes.
Yeah.
It changes it.
Last year, Kev, they made like, you're talking was it £4.5 million or something?
Aye, it's like a couple of decent guys' wages for them to actually bring into the club. So they're on a great run. They're really on a great run. But I have a look back at the game at Easter Road. We had just came back off a really, really tough night in Munich. It was a 12:30 kickoff on the Saturday, and they caught us cold in the first half. In the second half, we should have got a draw and maybe more. So I'm looking at that. They're bringing a massive support with them, an absolute massive support. So us as a support, us in the stadium have got to be up for it as well. It could be an absolute humdinger in an afternoon. A good old-fashioned cup tie, but I still expect us to come out on top. I really do still expect us to come out on top. And before you go to Quinny, the Proclaimers are getting a lot of love because of what happened yesterday, Easter Road. And I do find it quite funny that any time a Proclaimers song gets played, that Bill Drummond for the KLF makes money because he owns the publishing rights. Which I find utterly bizarre, yes.
I did not know that.
Aye.
There you go. Bill Drummond, he'll be laughing all the way to the bank. He's a Rangers fan, by the way. Quinny, did you know that? Aye? You would have known that, Kev. Quinny, Hibs. Sorry, I wasn't asking you. I was asking Kev, the music mogul up on the top right there. I do think it's the toughest game. I think, we're going to have to be at our absolute peak. We need to be our best against Hibs. Yeah, you've got a home advantage, but as Kev says, you're going to have more of a cup atmosphere with the fact that they've been given 7,000 tickets, which I'm sure they'll sell. I've always felt, when you look at Scottish clubs underperforming, Hibs are one of the worst culprits. They should really be a force of some description. They've not really been a force anywhere. They win the odd trophy here or there, not very often. And they could have pulled the trigger on Davy Gray quite easily. And I think that most clubs have been guilty of that in the past. They persevered, to use a word that they like, with him. And it's going to be tough. It'll be really, really tight this weekend. I think Celtic have got enough, but we had enough against Hibs at Easter Road. We just didn't turn up the first half, as Kev says. What are you expecting against Hibs in the Cup?
I think, to kind of answer the question on domestic kind of ranking where this game comes, I think the first time we played Aberdeen, when it was Aberdeen are second, some people tried to put a bit of pressure or meaning into that match, but a lot of Celtic fans were kind of well, it's nice that Aberdeen are second, but it's not going to last, kind of thing. It's a bit of fun. We've got a bit of a title challenge game. We can have a bit of a laugh and a joke about it, and obviously the game went the way it went. And then the derby, if you think about the last time we had that, we're home and host in the league, we're well ahead, and obviously we didn't quite get the result, but people tried to make it about being more meaningful than what it was, because again, they won it and we're still so far ahead of them. But this is the first domestic game where it is really meaningful and really has consequences, because those other games, we drew Aberdeen, we lost against them, and this is a game where if you don't win it, you're out the cup, treble's gone. And that's one of the things that Brendan has put on the table since pre-season, is treble is the objective, I beg your pardon. So yeah, it should be a classic cup game in that respect. Too many of these cups that over the last couple of years, it does feel like we go through the motions and we just kind of, we're in the final, and it just kind of happens. But this will be a real quarter final.
No, you're right. Proper up for it. And I think going into that Aberdeen game, I made the point. Everybody was talking about Aberdeen. I'm talking the semi of the League Cup here. Everybody was talking about Aberdeen. No one was focusing on Celtic. And I made the point before the game. We went in and we absolutely trounced them. But it took us 29 minutes to score our first goal that day against Aberdeen. We beat them 6-0. I'm not going to predict that against Hibs. I think that the momentum is huge. As Kev says, it's massive for this particular tie. And if we win it, I fully expect, nothing taken for granted, of course, fully expect us to go on and have a clean sweep domestically. Listen, this has been phenomenal. We've not even spoken about the Irish Origins kits. I'm sure we'll talk about them tomorrow with Liam Carrigan, who loves a wee bit of football jersey purgatory, if that's a word. Thanks everybody for getting involved. 1700 strong. And if you haven't done so already, give us a thumbs up on the video, subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell. And if you want to come and see us with Martin O'Neill, I think there's about 32 tickets available, and the link is underneath the video, so that's going to sell out. And he's the best in the business. Thanks everybody for getting involved. Thank you to Kevin and Quinny for joining me on a Celtic State of Mind.
Thank you.
Heel.